So today we're going to tell you about Telescope, so you know what it is. And we're going to tell you about what we've been doing in the Netherlands to try and find new solutions. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I'll start with the context with Epidos. I'll explain what it is. Then Alberto will talk about Telescope, and then Petra will explain what we've been doing in the first phase of the project. And then Alberto, I think, will explain what we aim to do in the second phase that is just starting. Okay, so what is Epidos? That's for the context of the project. Epidos stands for Elsevier Partnership Contributing to Dutch Open Science. So that's why we say Epidos. And it's 2.5 years ago, Elsevier signed an agreement with the Dutch community at large, so universities, hospitals, universities of applied sciences, funders. And this open science agreement has 3 legs, publishing, reading, which is pretty standard, and a third leg, which is open science services. And the beauty of this is that we can try and build whatever we want as long as it supports open science. And there are rules to this, of course. We want to make sure that this is proper open science so that it's vendor neutral, it's fully transparent, there's no lock-in, data portability. So these rules of the game were set from the start so that there's no question afterwards. And we can try really to support as much as possible the Dutch ecosystem. And so far, we've launched 5 pilots. We have a 6th one coming. It's very diverse, as you can see. It goes from funding data to and data monitor that I mentioned. I presented an hour and a half ago. And so the 4th pilot is called Telescope, and it's about research infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Guillaume. Hi, everybody. Talking about Telescope, which is an idea that we started thinking of with a gentleman by the name of Thibault Lery at KAUST, and Timmy is from KAUST. He just spoke at the previous meeting. So the idea is not ours. We just try to execute it at our best. Why is research infrastructure important? Because there's a lot of money that goes into that. It's 11.3 billion euros. Those are figures from the European Commission just for Europe every year. But we also went into the financial statements of the institutions to look at how much they spend in terms of capital investments and operational expenditures, as well as how much money the institutions can make by lending their equipment and their expertise and making it available, for example, to corporate customers. And with all that, there's a huge gap in the information about the outputs that are related to the equipment. So this is a survey that was done by Agilent Technologies, the vendors of scientific equipment, among other things. They interviewed 250 facilities managers in the US, and they asked a very simple question, among others. How do you track the publications? And almost 50% of them said, well, we try to do our best manually. Essentially, we look into databases, we ask people, we try to figure it out. And 21%, they simply give up and say, we don't do it. It's too complicated. And why is it so complicated? Because if you just go to Scopus or Web of Science or PubMed, and you try to look for publications that have used a microscope or an NMR instrument at your institution, you will not find them, because that information is usually found in the full text, in the materials and methods section where you describe the experiment. That's where you find the information. So it's really, essentially, you have to read the publications if you want to find that information. Which is why a vice chancellor of research at the UK university that we interviewed some time ago said that running a research infrastructure investment plan is jumping into the dark. And we're trying to jump out of the dark by making this information available. So we've spoken with a lot of institutions, and we have identified 3 main use cases: evaluate impact, so measuring the outcomes of those investments. Showcasing is another important factor, because of course you always want to attract the best talent, for example, by showing all the great equipment that you have. And there's another very, very important use case that is strategic planning and discovery. So what's our next investment? What's the landscape of research infrastructure? How can we steer our investments towards the right direction? We focused on the first use case because that was considered the most important, but we also got the second one, wouldn't say for free, but almost, by using our products such as Pure, as you can imagine. And how we solve this issue is essentially by reading the articles at scale with machine learning algorithms and all this stuff. So you'll find a lot of equipment mentioned in an article. Some of that is not really relevant, like an orbital shaker, all this desk stuff, it's not really important. But if you have an instrument that's worth $1 million, you want to know about that. And all this information is available in the articles. So what we do, essentially, we work on a language model that recognizes sentences where equipment is mentioned, pulls out the mentions, and then links those mentions to a knowledge base of equipment, which is usually provided at this stage by the institution. So we approach the institutions, we ask them to provide a list of equipment, and clearly, if you have Pure, and if you're tracking equipment in Pure, there you have it, that's your list, with a very nice and detailed metadata model, by the way. So what we do is we collect all the publications from that institution. It's a simple thing that you can do in Scopus or Scival or even Pure, right? You have the publications, the metadata. What we do, we actually go back to the full text, because as you can imagine, the Scopus database doesn't, you don't get records out of thin air, you get articles from the publishers, and we have licensing agreements with these publishers, where we can process their content and we can do this kind of linking and entity extraction, right? So everything that's in Scopus is in scope for this project, not just our articles from Elsevier journals, everything. So we identify the corpus, we collect the full text, we feed our pipeline with the list of equipment and with this full text, and what you get out of it is a list of equipment ID, Scopus ID of the publication. And then you can use this list to aggregate by facility, for example, by vendor, by technology, whatever you want to do. You can create publication sets in Scival and analyze that, or you can use Pure and load those links in Pure, which is what we've done with our partners. So this is an example of an analysis that you can do in Scival. We looked at a specific lab within an institution, and the baseline, that institution is really into innovation. So they wanted to see what's the impact on patenting on our scientific output. So the average for the institution is 80.3 publications per 1,000 are cited in patents. But if you look at the publications where equipment from that specific lab was involved, it's 111.8. So it's a significant jump, 40% more. So that lab in particular is providing a huge contribution in terms of innovation and patenting to the institution. And then you can drill down and you can do case studies and all of that. And then once you have those links, you can push them in Pure. This is actually a page from the test portal of the TU Eindhoven, where you can see the web page of the equipment, and these 25 publications were not there. If you go into the production portal, you won't see any publication, but in the test environment, you have 25 publications with all the metadata, with all the metrics, with the links to the authors, and then the fingerprint is also of the equipment is also fed by the fingerprints of the publication. So it's a much better, richer experience. There's much more information for you to showcase your equipment. And that's Telescope in a nutshell. Over to Petra.
Yeah. Thanks, Alberto. From our perspective, we as a customer, I would like to give you a brief overview on how we got into this project. First of all, I would like to tell you in a brief overview how TUE looks like. We are quite a small university, 9 departments. We have 2,500 personnel. That is scientific staff, which is including the PhDs, which are in the Netherlands included in staff. And we have 14,000 students and 4 institutes that are working together in the faculty. We are in the heart of the Brainport region, as you see, and we're quite known about our spin-offs that are founded from the university campus. And we're top in research partnership with the industry. In our strategy goals, we have the focus set on several SDGs, which are also shown on the portal. And for instance, the SDG 7 is really linked to one of our institutes on clean energy. And the institute is called the IRIS Institute. So how come we were asked for the telescope project by Elsevier? We already had our equipment, about 300 pieces of equipment on our portal visible. And when we were asked, we were really thinking of what would it help us for? And the sharing of equipment where we could be sustainable and have more impact was one of the goals that were also mentioned in our strategy. We would like to have an increasing exposure also internationally. And also the open science scope is mentioning that we should be reproducing our findings. We would like to have some more transparency on the return on investment. And what also was mentioned by management was that the type and the equipment manufacturer doesn't always say what equipment can do, but it can be explained by the research output that is connected. So we were interested to join, and the process that was used was actually with iterations, and we had retrospectives every 4 to 6 weeks, where the achievements of Alberto's team were shared, and the next actions were defined. The confluence area from Elsevier was used to share information, and we had 3 persons involved from our university. One of them was working on a purchasing cluster market. And cluster market was is described as an easy-to-use laboratory equipment scheduling and management system, and will serve as a source for equipment for Pure. So actually there's now a relation, or you are talking, Elsevier is talking with cluster market to see if there is an easy relation to be created. Next to that, customer perspective, that Elsevier was always taken into account our pace and our schedule. So that was a really nice cooperation. But if you see cluster market is if we use cluster market as this scheduling tool, it's not known, and it's not having a front end where you can really show and profile the equipment. So that's actually why we would like to have the information on the portal from cluster market and have there the relation to our research output. So here is an example. It's from another piece of equipment, the wind tunnel, which was actually quite known in our environment in the region, since it brought the winner of the Tour de France. And in our test environment, we have the research output related, but also we have the link to the booking system. So immediately from the portal, there is an option for people to go directly to cluster market and book and schedule for the piece of equipment. This is the perspective. I see that the screen is not working. I had a movie in here. From here, the research output is shown, and you can see in this screen on the portal that the research output is linked to the piece of equipment, so you can link through. But actually, it's not working as I expected. The actual results. We had more than 300 pieces of equipment in our database, and Elsevier has found 24% of the equipment linked. They could link it to research output. And if you see on the right-hand side, there is indeed the graph that mentions that there is a higher citation number on output that is linked to the equipment. The peak you see here has indeed to do with with 3 publications actually that are published in 2018 and have the one of them is linked indeed to the wind tunnel. Almost finished. So to keep the momentum going, there are some focal points. We closed down the first phase of the project. And we would like to have the results that are currently in our test environment to put them in the production environment. But as always, the projects, of course, need to be discussed internally. People need to be involved, and it should be all agreed. So next week, I'm having this meeting with a strategic enabling infrastructure group, and hopefully in the short term we can have the results on our portal. What we need to find out is the process. How are we going to have the implementation going from cluster market, but also we need to think about the equipment of the classification of equipment and some rules. What are you going to bring in cluster market? Are you looking at certain types? Are you going to look at the value of the equipment? Things like that need to be established. And we are thinking about the option or possibilities to have a DOI on equipment. But that's always difficult because you also have to think about researchers citing the equipment, which for me it's like I was thinking about QR codes on the equipment that could easily be brought into Mendeley and have at least an easy way to cite the equipment in research output. So phase 2 is coming up.
Okay.
From our perspective.
Thank you, Petra. I'll be very quick because I'd like to give you time for questions. And great idea about the QR codes. I'm definitely going to share it with our colleagues at Mendeley. You mentioned already what we want to achieve in phase 2, so I will go very quickly through cluster market. So we want to use that as a master system. There's everything, every single piece of equipment, benches, everything in cluster market. So we need a way to filter and select only the equipment that is specific for the use cases that we are after. So that's the first phase. Very simply, we will get the equipment information from cluster market. We will use it in Pure, and then we will also use it for Telescope to create the links. But we have more ambitious thoughts because we would like, for example, to use projects so that when you book time on an instrument, you can specify for which project, and then we have an early indication. And we can create already a link between the equipment and the project in Pure, and we know what to expect. At some point in time, we would expect some publications coming in related to that project that are using that piece of equipment. So we want to explore our integrations even further. And as Petra said, there's an active collaboration with Cluster Market. They have an API, and we're talking with them to make this happen.